Welcome to Imprint with Natalie Walton, a podcast about creating a life you love. This is episode 2. Before we start today's episode, I want to share the exciting news of a pre-order campaign for my upcoming interiors book, Still the Slow Home. It will be officially published in May 2020, but if you pre-order the book before then, you will receive an exclusive gift. I have created a mini masterclass based on my best-selling course, The Styling Masterclass, and I will share how I sourced the homes within the book, how I styled the pages, as well as some of the big lessons that I learned in creating the book and how I've applied those within my own home. If you want to receive this exclusive gift, as I said, you need to pre-order the book, keep your proof of purchase, and visit nataliewalton.com/still for more details. Hello, everyone. Welcome so much to episode 2 of Imprint. I'm really excited to share the first interview of this series. It is with a friend, Courtney Adamo, who lives just down the road from me, but we had to record this interview remotely due to coronavirus. We have both been self-isolating, so even though we're just a short distance apart, we had to do it remotely. There are a few little sound issues with this recording, which we've tried to fix up as much as possible, but please bear with it. I think that the overall conversation isn't impeding too much, and I hope that you enjoy it. Courtney and her family feature in my upcoming book Still, and I was really excited to share her story about how they embraced a slower way of life. And I also really wanted her to dig deep and really kind of deconstruct the idea of how she is able to let go of things so easily. Many of you will know her through Instagram. She has a very big following. And I think, Instagram is one of those arenas whereby we can think that we know someone, but we're only ever getting a small picture. And I really wanted to explore her thought process behind the decision to leave London and how she was able to let go of her possessions, the children's school, which she really loved, and this beautiful home that she had created. So they then went on a journey and traveled around the world, landed in Byron Bay, and we had known each other previously, but we have reconnected since then. And I'm really excited to share this interview with you and bring the conversation from the book, bring it to life so that you can learn a little bit more about her story and these ideas of embracing slow living. So I will now let you listen in, and I hope you enjoy it, and I'll touch base with you at the end of this interview. Thank you. Hi, Courtney. Thank you so much for joining me today on Imprint, a podcast that focuses on creating a life you love. Before we begin, can you please tell us a little bit about yourself for those of our listeners who might not have come across you before?
Yeah, thank you so much for having me, Natalie. I'm really flattered to be on your podcast, and I'm happy to share a little bit about me. I'm a mother of 5. We live here in Byron Bay in Australia, just around the corner from Natalie. We've lived here for about 3 years, and both my husband and I work from home. I am currently working on creating e-courses for families, I guess. So I've last year I launched an e-course aimed at parents, all about family lifestyle, and I'm currently working on a new one for mothers and mothers to be, all about pregnancy, birth, and the first year.
So I guess, first of all, I'm so happy that we're actually finally able to have this conversation because obviously I had hoped that we would be able to meet in your own home, and that would have been, lovely in a very different dynamic. But given what's happening in the world right now with coronavirus, we're both self-isolating. And so even though, as you say, we only live about 5 minutes down the road from each other, we're actually doing this recording remotely. So we're both hoping that the sound and the audio is all going to be okay, because both of us sort of live, I'm I guess you could classify as being in the country, and the signals sometimes can be a bit patchy. So let's keep our fingers crossed.
Yeah.
But I guess I just want to touch on or find out how you guys are going with this whole situation, because I find myself, sometimes it can feel like a real challenge, but then I also feel that in some ways it's this beautiful opportunity to slow down and also a golden opportunity to really kind of reassess and take a pause and think about how we're living our life and what is most important. So how are you guys going over there?
Yeah, I mean, I think I am no different than anyone else in saying that I'm going in waves of, emotional waves where one minute I feel really overwhelmed and stressed out and, even find myself crying. And the next minute I feel, immense gratitude to have my health and safety and to have my whole family all together under one roof. And like you said, I do think it is a wonderful opportunity for us to sit back and look at the way that we are living and consuming and treating our planet and treating each other. And it's an opportunity for us to kind of become more compassionate in all areas of our life. And I really believe that we'll come out of this stronger and more compassionate. I think in terms of slowing down, it's interesting because I already feel like we live a pretty slow life. We've kind of got that part of our slow living down. I feel we're quite good at that. And, we spend a lot of time, we live here and where we live, it's so beautiful. And we spend a lot of time outside and at the beach and in nature and with our community. And so I'm finding it a bit challenging to, I guess, just be kept home in our little house and to not be able to have that community interaction that we really love and value so much. It feels really lonely and isolating. And I'm sure that every one of us is feeling that way. But yeah, I mean, I think it's interesting because in some ways it's not that different from the way we live, although except we just can't be outside and be with our friends as often as we like. And I also have to say that it's not easy homeschooling 4 children and having a toddler at the same time, especially having kids of all ages. So I've got two boys in high school, and they have proper assignments and tests from the school. And so we're trying to support them through that. We have 2 girls in the primary school. And of course, we're trying to support them through that. Marla's in year 2. So she's just learning to read and write and do maths. And so we don't want her to lose steam in that. And so we're trying to support her. And so we've just got our hands full with trying to homeschool 4 children and then combat tantrums from the toddler. So
I was wondering how this kind of homeschooling experience differs, though, from when you were homeschooling when you went on your trip around the world, which we'll sort of touch on a little bit in a moment. But I was just interested because obviously you have done this before and you were doing it in a caravan most of the time. Yeah. So how do you find this experience different to last time?
Well, I mean, in some ways, I'm incredibly grateful that we had that experience because I do think that it does feel in many ways very familiar. And we learned a lot in those 18 months of homeschooling while we traveled. But of course, it's also incredibly different because we now have, high school aged children whose learning is way more intense and structured than what it was before. And instead of homeschooling 3 children, we're now homeschooling 4. And also for us, when we were traveling, it was a constant learning in the traveling. And so while we did have structured lessons, we focused a lot on reading and writing and maths. and geography, of course. It was we didn't have we I guess we were able to take the pressure off of ourselves a bit, because we knew even if we skipped a day of those kind of more structured assignments, they were still learning so much in all that was new around them, and all the people they were meeting, and activities they were doing, and sights they were seeing, and languages they were learning, and foods they were eating, and all of that was such an education in itself. So obviously we don't have that right now. And we're stuck in one little house all together we're playing a bit of musical rooms at the moment. It's like every one of us trying to find a quiet room. The teenagers need to get on a Zoom call with their teachers. I need to get on a call. I'm trying to find a quiet space. And it's just, we're all shuffling, trying to make it work at the moment.
Yeah, I can really relate to that in a major way right now, especially when you're trying to sort of juggle work as well.
Yeah.
So one of the reasons that I wanted to record this interview with you as one of the first interviews of the series was because, as I think I mentioned, I don't know, I feel like we've sort of covered so much ground already, but that you feature and your home features in my upcoming book, Still, which is about this idea of embracing a more conscious way of living within our own homes.
Yeah.
And I felt that you and your family really embodied many of these ideas within the book. You know, after all, you packed up your life in London and sold off most of your stuff and decided to travel around the world, as we touched on just a moment ago. And you didn't really have a known destination in mind in terms of where you were going to end up. But you were kind of, I guess, interested in this idea of exploring a slower way of living. So why was this important to you, this idea of slow living at that point? And was there a tipping point that led to that decision?
I think there were several tipping points and sort of so many different factors that led to that final decision to do that, to sell our house and to leave London, and try to seek out a slower place to live. It was something that I personally always craved. And so it was about trying to convince Michael that was something we needed as a family. And so I sort of would mention it time and time again to Michael, and it kind of had a lot to do with him coming around to the idea. But, for us, our eldest was about to turn 10. We lived a really wonderful life in London. I mean, I have really no complaints about it, but it was really fast paced and we were working really, really hard, and it was incredibly expensive to live there. I think that was one of the biggest factors, was just, having to work so hard really to just live paycheck to paycheck. And it felt like, the expression of a rat race. I mean, it really felt like that. I felt like we were on a treadmill running and running and running and still just not going anywhere. And I guess one of the big factors that kind of tipped me over the edge, there was a moment in the car where we were driving home from school, and Ivy was talking to me and telling me about something that had happened in the classroom that day. And I was so stressed with, I think it was something work related, that I had, a deadline or something, a project I was working on. And I was literally completely zoning her out. And we got home, and she kind of looked at me, kind of had this look of, why aren't you listening to me? And I looked at her like, I don't have time for this. And then I took a step back and just thought, I cannot live like this. I felt like, I only was picking the kids up from school 2 or 3 times a week. The other days, a nanny was doing it. On those days where I was being able to pick them up, I was feeling really stressed and rushed. And I just didn't want to live like that. I didn't want to be prioritizing work over my children and to be spending so much time away from them only just to be able to afford the life we were living. And yeah, I mean, a few months before we left, we had to like take a second, we had to get a bank loan just to pay the school fees. I mean, it was really financially, it was stressful, and so um, we just kind of had enough.
It's interesting though, because so I can see, you had all these different situations that were perhaps slowly accumulating and building to this sort of bigger tipping point. But at the same time, and this is what I asked you to write an essay about in the book, was this idea that of letting go. And I think that you are very good at this idea of that you were able to easily let go of your possessions and let go of the school that the children were going to and this life that you had built up in London and all that your identity was, that it was attached to it at that point, and you were able to let all of that go. And so I wonder, I'll let people read that in the book, but I wonder if you if you see yourself as fearless, because I think there is I think you have a very strong sense of self, and you have a quite a strong core within you, and I wonder if you see yourself as fearless.
I do in many ways, and I think with decisions like that, when it comes to life decisions, I do feel quite fearless. I think that's something that's maybe been in me all along. So even, even as a teenager, I remember asking my mom if I could go study abroad in Spain, and she was like, "No, you're 16 years old. Maybe when you're in college someday." And then I remember I looked up in a newspaper and found an actual exchange program offering, and it listed in the newspaper, and I filled that out and sent in my application, and I was accepted. And I literally went to my mom one afternoon and said, "Oh, I've been accepted. I'm going to go live in Spain for the summer." And she was like, what are you talking about?" And so, I went and I did, and I spent 2.5 months in Barcelona and came back. And then when I was 18, I went away to college, and, very excitedly and without much worry about how it might go, or how I might feel, or if I might miss my family. And I guess in terms of those sort of life decisions and taking on adventures, I've always been quite fearless in that way. I think it's funny because when I think about it, I often think, what's the worst that can happen? And that helps me a lot, because I think, well, what is the worst that can happen? Even when I'd met Michael and we'd been dating for only a month when we took a holiday to London together. And on that holiday, after only 1 month of dating, he went and had an interview with this company in London, and they hired him. And so he came back from this interview saying, "I think I'm going to take this job. I think I'll move here to London." And I said, "Oh, great. I've always wanted to live in Europe." And he was like, "What do you mean? You're going to come with me? You're only 22 years old." And I was like, "Yes, of course. Like, what could possibly go wrong?" And I really, I thought about it, what's the worst that can happen? Well, we fall out of love and I go back home, or I don't like living there and I go back home, or, I mean, I think in so many circumstances, if we really did ask ourselves, what's the worst that can happen, that worst case scenario is actually not that bad. I guess that's my take on it. To answer your question, I do think in some ways I don't have that element of fear in my decision making.
Yeah. It's interesting because I'm really fascinated about the decisions that we make and what guides us, and what part of it is innate in our personalities and what part is something that we learn or that has been fostered maybe by our upbringing. And do you think that your upbringing has anything to do with that?
I don't know. It's really hard to say. I think, I'm from a big family. I'm the eldest of 5 kids. And, I think that birth order actually has a lot to do with it, in the way that I was probably parented. And, being an eldest child, I think it's a very typical trait to be quite determined and to be a go-getter in some ways. And, I think that's something I've always been. But I don't know. I mean, I I'm the only one of the five of us that lives out of the state where we grew up in the US. And I guess you could say I'm more adventurous than the rest of them. And I don't know, that's probably just something I've always been. I don't know if it was really the way I was parented, but I find actually that whole conversation's a whole really amazing and fascinating topic, especially having five kids of my own, because I can see so clearly those traits of birth order in my own children and how they compare to the family I come from. And yeah, I find it really fascinating.
Obviously, so many people know you through Instagram, which is, of course, very different to knowing you. What might people be surprised to learn about you? What are some of the struggles that you've faced, or, and how have you overcome them during, the past sort of 10 or 20 years that, you've been an adult, I guess?
I don't know. I think, gosh, I feel like I'm getting the beauty of growing up really is that I feel like you become more loving towards yourself and I'm looking less for approval or a liking from everyone else and more about working on myself and doing something for my own development and I don't know, I think that's something that I've been working on and feel really good about in the last few years, is just caring less what people think. And that's something I think, again, going back to birth order, I'm an eldest child, and one of the biggest traits of an eldest child is wanting to be liked. And I see it in so many of the eldest children of all my friends. And we like to be liked, and we seek approval from others. And so being a good student was really important to me, growing up. And then, you bring in this element of social media and you want to be liked, and you want people to say good things. And so when you get a comment that's not nice or disapproval from people, it can be really, really hard. And that's something that I struggled with in the beginning when I first got on Instagram, probably 7 or 8 years ago now, probably 8 years ago now, actually. And I feel like I'm really starting to overcome that, which feels really good. And just caring less about what people think and more about how I think of myself and what kind of listening to that intuitive self and what feels good, and am I a good person, and am I doing the right thing, and am I loving my family, and all of those considerations matter so much to me.
And I guess talking about journeys as well, we first came into contact about 10 years ago when I became a contributor for Baby Chino, which was at the time a blog, and now it's a family lifestyle site and shopping portal. So what are some of that you've been so, an establishing founder of? So what are some of the big lessons that you've learned over the years of your involvement with that business? Because that's grown and evolved and changed a lot over the years as well.
Yeah, I mean, that I feel like I really had never. That was my first introduction to having my own business. And I started it with two friends of mine in Europe, and it grew so organically and naturally from the very beginning and all the way up until now. I mean, we've never had a business plan. We've never had some sort of strategy. And we've learned so much through that business. And obviously I think having an online blog and then a portal, it's fascinating because you can really see how quickly the landscape changes in that area, and how it continues to change. And yeah, I guess, we've had that business for nearly, I think it'll be 13 years in October. So 12 years we've had that business. And yeah, that's been a really good lesson in learning how to adapt to the changes and needs of what readers want and what businesses want. So we started as a blog, and then we after 3 years we launched the shopping portal, and that portal was really an answer to two very different needs. So we were offering a portal as a solution for readers and shoppers to find those independent brands and products that they were seeking. That, it was this kind of shift in mindset for people and parents to be buying more unique independent products instead of just like what you'd find at your department store. There was this trend to suddenly want to show up to a birthday party with something a bit more different than what, you would just like your typical toy. And also at that same time, there was this huge shift in an increase in all these independent children's brands. And so lots of brands came to us because they wanted that exposure that, that we could offer them. And this was way before there was Instagram. So back then we kind of were that online platform for them brought together the shops and the shoppers. And of course now all of those shops and businesses have their own Instagram and their own ways of gaining exposure. And so we've had to kind of look at that and see, revisit how our business plays in that world. And I think that it'll be interesting how it goes and the kind of shape that it takes from here, because it changes so quickly.
And what have you enjoyed most about that? Because again, like I feel I really want to explore these ideas of following our passions with what we do with our work. And what part of being involved in Baby Chino have you enjoyed the most?
I mean, there's so many aspects that I enjoyed. I really enjoyed having a business that was so closely related to my life. I mean, at the time it was, I had 2 children. My business partner, Esther, also had 2 children, and Emily also had 2 children. So we had these young children, and we basically have kind of tailored this business to the growing up of our children. And I loved that. I loved that it was such a passion project for us. It was something especially I think when I lived in London, I was a lot more involved and passionate in that business. But, it was so fun for us to, for example, have a birthday party for our children and try to come up with a really fun theme and creative ways to celebrate in that theme. And so then we would go and we would blog about that. And it's been so a part of my life, really. And also I've really enjoyed working with Esther and Emily, so my 2 business partners with Baby Chino, and working alongside them. And I think that it can, not every business like that can survive with friends, being run by friends, but ours has. And it's, I think it's just a testament to our friendship and also just our commitment to the company. And I found so much inspiration from working with them, and also like being able to have children and still work together, because, I would have a baby and be less involved, but Esther and Emily could step in, and then Esther would have a baby and I could work and fill in, for the space that she had left empty, So it's been so many things about that business that I really enjoyed.
That's great. And so, of course, as you mentioned, initially, you have now launched an online course. Well, it was called The Loop, and I understand that another one is in the works, as you mentioned a little bit earlier. So I sort of see this thread of communicating with people and creating a community seem to be consistent themes, because really, I mean, you do have a very large following on Instagram. I'm sure if you wanted to be a full-time influencer, you could be, there are so many options available to us, but this seems to be the type of work that you're drawn to. Why do you think that is? What is it about those strands of your career and your work life you find interesting?
Oh, that's such a good question. I mean, I think, that's really the beauty of blogs and Instagram, is that it allows us to feel so connected to a community, an international community. I've met some of my closest friends through Instagram, and I actually met my best friend through Instagram. Um, and I think, I met you through the blogging world, and it's opened so many doors in that way. And I feel like it's such, sometimes I think back to the days where my mom was parenting and she was home with her children in a house. She wasn't working. She didn't have Instagram. There was no way for her to connect or learn, or, she wasn't getting recipe inspiration, little phone in her hand. She had to come up with those things herself, or, maybe she would meet up with friends every once in a while. But I think we have so much. The benefit of this community that we have is so wonderful, and I just feel so inspired by all of the people that I get to come into contact with every day through that. And and there's so many wonderful ideas, and I think I love that aspect of what I've done, and I guess what I continue to do. I mean, that's especially what I love about the e-course. So, and I think what everyone loved the most about taking the course as well was just that community aspect, and the value that is in a group of women coming together, sharing their insights and offering tips, and being there in a space where you're all there with the aim of learning and growing together. I think that's, there's so much value in it, and something that I really enjoy being a part of.
And as I sort of said, this podcast is called Imprint because I'm interested in this idea of the decisions we make in relation to all the choices that we have, and how the impact of these decisions have not just on our own lives, but the world as well. So when we live in a world when we can, almost anything is possible, and we have so many choices, what do you want your life to be? What imprint do you want to make or leave on this planet or this world or your community?
I guess, I'm sure that it will continue to evolve over time. But, I'd say I'd really hope that I can leave a positive and inspirational imprint on parents who, offering them sort of the positive side of parenting, to see the joy in this position that we are in. And, and like you said before about slow living, if I can inspire others to do the same, I hope that that's something I can do. And, obviously we're all learning, and we're all kind of figuring out what works best for us and our families. But also, this year, I think more than ever, I'm motivated to share ways that we can be more mindful to our planet, and, how we can live a more environmentally conscious life. And a lot of that does come down to that sort of slow living, and finding joy in the more simple, activities and ways of living. I don't know. It's hard for me to, I guess, describe what I'd like my imprint to be. It's a wonderful question. but yeah, I guess my biggest joy right now in my life is, and I guess the thing I'm most proud of is really, being a mother, um, to my 5 children and my family, and how much I love and enjoy being a mother. And um, if I can inspire others to find ways of enjoying their children and slowing down in their life and being more conscious to live more environmentally, then that would be a wonderful achievement.
Yeah. And one of the things I find as well is that when we choose a particular path or a particular type of life, we really have to create boundaries. And there are certain, we have to sort of, if we're saying yes to one thing, then it means we're saying no to something else. And I think that this is something that I've observed within you. I feel like you're really good at setting boundaries about what's most important to you, whether that's in relation to your family or the type of work you do, or even what you choose to share on Instagram. Would you agree that the boundaries are something that you set intentionally, or how's your approach on that?
Oh, 100%. I mean, I'm a big believer in boundaries in so many different ways, like across everything, setting boundaries for myself and for my children and for our family, and just trying to, I don't know, I guess think about the bigger picture, and what, each of the all of the actions that we take, what kind of effect that has on ourselves and our and the people around us, and on our planet. So a simple kind of analogy is really, with our children, when you have boundaries in place, your children if you have this boundary around your children and you hold them tightly, then they feel more secure in that, and they feel more free in a way to live, because they know that they're being held tightly. And I guess that would sort of apply to us all. I mean, and yeah, I know I guess when it comes to making decisions about my own life and saying yes or no to certain things, I just kind of go with my gut and what feels right. And if something doesn't feel right for whatever reason, if there's a little niggly feeling inside, then I say no to it. I don't do it.
And what about sort of getting more nitty gritty in terms of time management? Because again, I think that this is something that really presents on your feed. And I see this, comments people make about how do you manage to, have your home so tidy all the time and your children look perfect. And, these are the kind of things that people say. And obviously, I think that perhaps you manage your time really well so that I'll give you an example within my own home. I find that, say, at home, the more that I keep on top of keeping my house tidy, the easier it is to keep tidy. That's something that I find with how I manage my home. And in terms of how I manage my work productivity, I really try and focus on my most important tasks first and really get them done. Have you found any sort of things that really work for you in terms of how you manage your home life or your work life in terms of being productive, and any things that you've really learned over the years?
Well, I think like you, I'm a constant tidy upper. And like you, I think that, if you let your house get messy, it will get even messier. So um, I'm I mean, I don't watch any TV. I think that's such a huge thing. Like, people always say, how do you have time for that? And I just think, well, I never sit around and watch TV. So, when I'm, at the end of the day, when I could be watching TV, I'm often, folding laundry or tidying up the kitchen or trying to organize and regroup my house so that we can wake up the next day and feel fresh and organized from the start. And I like that. I like kind of having a clean, organized start every day. I'm a big believer in lists, when it comes to tasks or the work that I have on my plate. I like to have write down what needs to happen and tick off what I've done, and and just one step in front of the other. And yeah, I mean, I think I don't know. I feel like, yeah. So it's a constant work in progress, trying to keep all the wheels turning and in motion, and, all of the balls that we're juggling as mothers, to keep all the balls in the air, I guess, to use another analogy. But I really think that, also, I can't really take all the credit. I have a really wonderfully hands-on husband who is like such, I mean, I think he probably really deserves to be on this podcast more than I do, in terms of keeping our
Maybe
family.
I should. That's probably actually a really good idea.
Yeah. In terms of keeping our, being the glue that holds our family together, and obviously, and no person is better than he is at knowing when to draw a line and having boundaries and doing what is good and right. And I mean, I constantly go to him for decision-making help. And I think that I am so lucky in that regard. There's no way that I could accomplish all that I accomplish, or do all that we do without his help.
Well, that actually sort of segues nicely into my next question, which is about mentors. And how have you had any mentors along the way? I mean, it sounds like in some regards, maybe Michael actually has perhaps been a little bit of a mentor for you, or certainly a sounding board. But have you had any along the way in terms of your business life or business career, or even to do with family and those other more personal development side of your life? And also, are there any people that you really look up to?
There are so many people that I can specifically think of who have helped shape the path of my life up to this point, and the decisions that we make, and the way that I parent, and the way that that we live our life. And I think, like you said, Michael is my biggest mentor in life, and he's the smartest person I know, and so inspiring in so many ways, and that's helped shape so many things for me, and given me clarity. But it's so interesting because I'm currently working on my next e-course, which is about pregnancy, birth in the first year. And just even thinking back to the beginning of my motherhood journey, and how much I've learned since that beginning. And when I think about the way that I gave birth, like the people who shaped those experiences for me. And I mean, I can think back to, even when I first took my first yoga class, and my yoga teacher in London, Nadia Narain, and how much she influenced me in learning to trust my body and have that sort of mind-body connection. And then, I remember reading Ina May Gaskin's book about birth, and she had a profound, huge effect on the way that I birthed babies. And my last two babies were I feel like such a credit to her. And moving here and meeting I mean, even thinking back even before, my business partners, particularly Esther, taught me so much about parenting, and I really respect and honor the way that she parents her children. And then moving here, and the friends that I have here, and one of my closest friends, Amy, is a really wonderful mother, and she's so in tune to how her relationships in her life, and that really has been so inspirational for me. And work-wise, I have to thank you for a lot of the inspiration and mentoring that you've given me. I mean, you've been a huge mentor for me in the last more than a year, last couple of years. So, I think I really believe in, this idea of soulmates, and it doesn't just apply to your partner. I think there's so many soulmates that I have in life that extend beyond my partner, and I'm incredibly thankful for them in my life.
So I've got some quick questions I want to ask, but before I do, so what's next for you? I mean, obviously it feels like our whole world is just completely wrapped up in what's happening with coronavirus, but if we either just sort of try and push that aside or just look a little bit broader than that, what are you looking forward to in 2020 or beyond?
I'm really looking forward to launching the next e-course, hopefully in the next 6 weeks or maybe a couple months. And, hoping that actually it might be a timely moment to be able to launch an e-course, because the beauty actually of an e-course is that it brings together a community of people online. And so we can all connect from our own individual homes all over the world. And so hopefully that will resonate with people. And I'm excited about this particular topic because I think it's a really sacred season of your life, pregnancy and birth, and that first year of your baby's life. And it's so important to have a community around you during that time and to feel the connection of other people and the, collective wisdom that we can all share with each other. And so hopefully it will resonate with people. And I don't know what else for 2020. I mean, we were hoping Michael turns 50 this year. We were hoping to have a big party for him in June. And I don't know what will happen now with the coronavirus. And Michael's father turns 80 this year. And so we were hoping to make it over to the US to celebrate that. So, there's a lot of unknowns right now, I think, for everyone. And so we're just taking it, day by day and trying to go with the flow.
So as I mentioned, I've got some little questions that I wanted to ask you. And this podcast in many ways has evolved from the blog that I used to have, Daily Imprint. And I used to publish these questions every day with different people, creatives and people that I would come across during my work as a deputy editor on a interiors magazine. So I thought I would ask you some of these questions. So they're just kind of quick questions, just whatever comes to your mind first. And let's see. Some of them you've kind of answered a little bit, but just let's go with what happens. All right. So which 5 words best describe you?
Wow. Determined. It's so tricky. I think I'm happy. I'm quite organized. I'm can be quite stubborn. And I also think I'm quite loving.
Okay, great. There you go. You got 5. Well done. Okay. What was your first job and what path have you taken since?
Oh gosh, my first job. Are we thinking of going all the way back to like when we were little?
Well, whatever. I mean, some people used to say like literally their very first job, if they were sort of working at a newsagent or something like that, or other people would say like their first career job once they left university, or however you want to take it to mean.
So I've had lots of jobs. I had lots of jobs when I was younger. My dad used to give us jobs from the time we could walk. He was a big believer in chores and jobs. But I'd say that my first real job was actually becoming a mother. And then that taught me more than anything else I can even think of. But I guess next up after that was really starting Baby Chino and growing a business from that point on.
And what's your proudest career achievement?
I guess, I was, parenting aside, I was really proud last year to launch an e-course and to have been able to connect with the number of women, and there were a few men actually, who signed up for that course. It was definitely, I think, in terms of my career, that was one of the biggest and most proud moments.
And what's the best decision that you've made?
Moving here to Byron Bay, hands down. Not a day goes by that we do not feel so thankful that we live here.
Who inspires you? I know we've touched on this a little bit already, but anyone else?
Gosh. I mean, my family, I guess, my family and my husband and my friends in this community. And I feel very, very fortunate to live here and to have the connections and community that we have. And I am constantly learning from people, my friends and everybody who I get to, spend my days with, coronavirus aside.
What are you passionate about?
I'm passionate about my family. Michael and I are quite passionate about cooking and eating. We have long been passionate travelers, but that has sort of taken a back seat, I think, as we sort of start to reevaluate our life in a sort of environmental way. And obviously, I'm passionate about trying to leave this planet with as little of an impact as possible. What's
the best lesson you've learnt?
Well, someone very wise told me recently that, wait, what is it? Done is better than perfect. And that was.
I wonder who that
was. What'd you say?
I wonder who that was.
Yeah. I really love that lesson because I think, again, this is going back to birth order again, but I am a perfectionist. And I think that can be quite limiting in some of the ways that we, in doing things and actually just getting the job done. And I can see it so much in my eldest son too. He feels like he can't, if he can't do it perfectly, then he might as well not do it at all. And so it's something I'm trying to teach my children as well, is just done is better than perfect. And, actually doing the job, even if it's not perfect, teaches you and you grow. And perhaps the next time you do it, you can aim for perfection, or more perfection, but just get the job done.
Great. Which person, living or dead, would you most like to meet?
I don't know. Right now, because I'm in the middle of this e-course and we're talking about birth, I just think that it would be amazing to meet with Ina May Gaskin and to hear her talk and share. And this, I just think she's such an amazing woman and she's been so influential on me in my life. But definitely it would be an honor to meet her. And we never watch any movies and I don't know any celebrities. So this question is always like, I never have the right answer for it because I don't know any celebrities or famous people I want to hang out with.
No, that's fine. That's fine. That's all good. And last question, what are you currently reading?
Well, there are 2 books next to my bed that I'm like both reading, kind of reading at the same time. One is called Cutting for Stone, and I actually don't know the author's name. And the other one is Educated. I read Where the Crawdads Sing, which was such a beautiful book. I read that a few months ago. And then when I shared that on Instagram, so many people recommended the book Educated. I think it has a similar theme. And so I've sort of half started both those books, but I guess because I'm doing this e-course, there's so much research involved. So I'm actually really reading a bunch of more, birth and pregnancy books.
Courtney, thank you so much for taking the time out, especially during this challenging time when I know that, both of us have got our families home and it's a little bit tricky, but I really appreciate it. I'm so happy to have your beautiful home in my book as well, and really thankful for our friendship. And I look forward to when we can actually do this in person and not have to do it with dodgy internet connections. So I really appreciate it. Thanks so much.
Well, it's been such a joy actually talking to another human being outside of my family for an hour. So thank you very much for having me on your podcast and of course for having me in your book. It's a huge honor.
Thanks so much. Thank you for joining me today and the first interview as part of this series. I hope you've enjoyed learning more about Courtney's journey and some of the big lessons that she's learnt along the way. Now, I would love to hear from you. If you've enjoyed listening to Imprint, please hit subscribe wherever you're listening to it today. And it would mean so much if you could also rate and review it and spread the love on Instagram. You can find me there at Natalie Walton, and Courtney is at Courtney Adamo. And please hashtag Imprint Podcast too. You will find show notes for this episode over at nataliewalton.com/podcast, including details of Courtney's course. And just a reminder that if you pre-order Still now, you will receive an exclusive bonus gift. Just keep your proof of purchase and also visit nataliewalton.com/still. Thank you to Jaeger Media for producing this podcast and the people of the Bundjalung Nation where it was created. I look forward to meeting you again next week. I'm Natalie Walton, and you've been listening to Imprint.